Introduction: the greatest technology story ever sold. 1. The story begins, as so many modern stories do, with a moment of apparent magic. In November 2022, a small San Francisco company called OpenAI released a chatbot named ChatGPT to the public. The company expected modest interest. Instead, the chatbot became the fastest-growing consumer application in history, reaching 100 million users within 2 months. By January 2023, ChatGPT was generating more traffic than Netflix, Twitter, and Pinterest combined. The world had discovered artificial intelligence, and it was entranced. The experience of using ChatGPT was genuinely remarkable. You could ask it questions about history, science, literature, philosophy, cooking, coding, anything, and it would answer with fluency and confidence. You could ask it to write a poem in the style of Shakespeare, or a business plan for a startup, or a love letter to someone you had just met. It would comply, producing text that was often indistinguishable from what a talented human might write. It seemed, to many users, that the machine was thinking, that it understood what they were asking and was reasoning its way to an answer. The technology industry had been preparing for this moment for years. The term artificial intelligence had been circulating for decades, but for most of that time, the technology had failed to live up to the name. The AI systems of the past were brittle, narrow, and easily confused. They could play chess or recognize faces, but they could not hold a conversation or write an essay. They were impressive in their domains, but their domains were small. ChatGPT changed that perception. Here was a system that seemed to do everything, or at least, a great many things. It could write code and poetry, explain quantum mechanics and Elizabethan drama, translate between languages, and generate recipes. It was not perfect. It made mistakes, sometimes embarrassing ones, but its breadth of capability was unprecedented. The impression it created was that AI had finally arrived, that the long-promised revolution was at hand. The financial markets responded with extraordinary enthusiasm. Within months, the technology companies most associated with AI, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, Meta, added trillions of dollars to their market capitalizations. Venture capital poured into AI startups at a rate not seen since the dot-com boom. The phrase, artificial intelligence, appeared in earnings calls, investor presentations, and government policy documents with increasing frequency. The AI revolution had begun. 2. This book is about that revolution, what it is not, and what it will become. The central argument is simple but counterintuitive. AI may not be real, but the bubble it has created will change the world anyway. By AI may not be real, I mean something specific. The systems we call artificial intelligence, the chatbots, the image generators, the code assistants, are real. They exist, they work, and they are useful. But the intelligence attributed to them is not real. These systems do not think, understand, or reason. They do not have minds, consciousness, or awareness. They are sophisticated pattern-matching engines, trained on vast amounts of data to produce outputs that appear intelligent. The appearance is compelling. So compelling that many people, including many experts, have been fooled. But it is an appearance, not a reality. This distinction matters for reasons that go beyond philosophy. The entire economic case for AI, the trillions of dollars being invested, the valuations of AI companies, the promises of productivity and transformation, rests on the assumption that AI is intelligent, or at least that it is on a path to becoming intelligent. If that assumption is false, the economic case collapses. The investments will prove excessive. The valuations will prove unjustified. The promises will prove empty. But the collapse will not be without consequences. The money invested in AI is real. The infrastructure built for AI, the data centers, the chips, the energy projects, is real. The debt incurred to finance AI is real. The jobs affected by AI, both created and destroyed, are real. When the bubble bursts, these realities will not disappear. They will assert themselves in the form of financial losses, economic disruption, and social upheaval. This is the paradox at the heart of the book. A technology that is not intelligent can nevertheless transform the world. The belief in AI, the narrative, the expectations, the investment, has a power that the technology itself may never possess. The bubble is real, even if the intelligence is not. and the bubble will change everything. 3. To understand the AI phenomenon, we must first understand the story that has been told about it. This story has several elements. First, there is the claim of breakthrough. The story says that AI has made extraordinary progress in recent years, that the systems we have today are fundamentally different from those of a decade ago, and that this progress will continue. The implication is that we are on an upward trajectory, moving toward machines that can match and eventually surpass human intelligence. Second, there is the claim of inevitability. The story says that AI is not just a possibility, but a certainty, that the progress we have seen is part of an inexorable march toward artificial general intelligence, and that those who fail to embrace AI will be left behind. The implication is that the only rational response is to invest heavily in AI, to adopt it as quickly as possible, and to prepare for a future in which machines play an increasingly central role. Third, there is the claim of transformation. The story says that AI will change everything, that it will revolutionize every industry, transform every job, and reshape every aspect of human life. The implication is that the stakes are enormous, that the winners of the AI revolution will reap extraordinary rewards, and that the losers will face obsolescence. These claims are not entirely false. AI has made genuine progress. The systems we have today are more capable than those of a decade ago, and further progress is likely. AI will change many things, including some that are difficult to predict. But the claims are exaggerated. The progress is not as rapid as the story suggests. The inevitability is not as certain as the story implies. The transformation is not as comprehensive as the story promises. The gap between the story and the reality is the source of the bubble. Investors have poured money into AI based on the story, the promise of breakthrough, inevitability, and transformation. If the story proves false, if the breakthrough stalls, if the inevitability fails to materialize, if the transformation proves less comprehensive than promised, the investments will be revealed as excessive. The bubble will burst. 4. The AI bubble is not the first technological bubble in history, and it will not be the last. The pattern is familiar. A genuinely new technology emerges, captures the public imagination, and attracts enormous investment. The investment drives up valuations, which attracts more investment, which drives up valuations further. The cycle continues until the gap between expectation and reality becomes too large to ignore, at which point the bubble bursts and the cycle reverses. The dot-com bubble of the late 1990s is the most obvious parallel. The internet was a genuinely transformative technology. It did change the world, just as its promoters promised. But the valuations of internet companies in 1999 were based on expectations that were wildly optimistic. Companies with no revenue and no profits were valued at billions of dollars on the assumption that the internet would make them enormously profitable. When the bubble burst in 2000, trillions of dollars of value were destroyed, and many of the most highly valued companies failed. The AI bubble has similar characteristics. The technology is genuine. Machine learning, natural language processing, and computer vision are real advances. But the valuations of AI companies are based on expectations that are at least as optimistic as those of the dot-com era. Companies with modest revenues are valued at tens or hundreds of billions of dollars on the assumption that AI will make them enormously profitable. When the bubble bursts, the losses will be enormous. But there are differences as well. The scale of the AI bubble is larger than the dot-com bubble. The amount of capital invested in AI infrastructure, data centers, chips, energy projects, is unprecedented. The concentration of investment in a few companies, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, is greater than in the dot-com era. The involvement of governments, through subsidies, export controls, and industrial policy, is more extensive. The result is a bubble that is larger, more concentrated, and more politically charged than its predecessors. The consequences of the AI bubble bursting will therefore be more severe. The dot-com crash caused a recession. The AI crash could cause something worse, a financial crisis, a prolonged economic downturn, and a period of social and political upheaval. The stakes are higher, and the risks are greater. 5. This book is divided into 7 parts. The first part, What is AI really?, examines the technology itself, what it is, how it works, and what it is not. It questions whether the impressive outputs of modern AI systems should really be described as intelligence, whether large language models actually understand anything, and whether the dream of artificial general intelligence is achievable or merely a marketing slogan. The second part, the AI gold rush, follows the money. It traces the flow of capital into AI companies, startups, infrastructure, and semiconductors, and compares the AI boom to previous financial bubbles. It examines the chip war, the data center economy, and the trillion-dollar question of where AI revenues will come from. The third part, the bubble, examines the dynamics of the AI bubble, the expectations that drive it, the narratives that sustain it, and the warning signs that indicate it may be reaching its peak. The fourth part, when the AI bubble bursts, imagines what happens when the bubble collapses, the financial crash, the economic crisis, and the social and political consequences. The fifth part, the aftermath, examines the survivors, the restructuring, and the question of who pays for the bubble's excesses. The sixth part, the world after AI, explores the long-term consequences of the AI revolution, the transformation of education, employment, information, politics, and human value. The seventh part, beyond the bubble, asks what was real, what was illusion, and what comes next. The conclusion returns to the central paradox. AI may not be real, but the consequences are. 6. Before we begin, a note on terminology. Throughout this book, I use the term AI to refer to the broad category of technologies that are marketed under that name: machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, computer vision, and related fields. This is not because I believe that these technologies constitute intelligence in any meaningful sense. On the contrary, a central argument of this book is that they do not. But the term AI has become so widely used that avoiding it would be pedantic and confusing. I use the term, but I use it with skepticism. I also use the term bubble to describe the current state of AI investment. This is a contested term. Some argue that AI is a genuine technological revolution, not a speculative bubble. Others argue that while some AI valuations may be excessive, the technology will ultimately justify the investment. I do not dismiss these arguments. The distinction between a technological revolution and a speculative bubble is not always clear in real time. The internet was both, a genuine revolution that was also accompanied by a speculative bubble. The same may be true of AI. But I believe that the evidence points toward bubble. The gap between the capabilities of AI and the claims made about it is too large. The gap between the revenues generated by AI and the valuations of AI companies is too large. The gap between the promises of AI and the evidence of its productivity is too large. These gaps cannot persist indefinitely. When they will close abruptly, and the consequences will be severe. 7. The story of AI is a story about technology, but it is also a story about human nature. It is a story about our tendency to believe in magic, to invest in promises, to follow the crowd. It is a story about the power of narrative to shape reality, to create wealth and destroy it, to build empires and topple them, to inspire hope and generate fear. The greatest technology story ever sold is not the story of artificial intelligence. It is the story that we are about to create it, that machines are becoming intelligent, that they will soon match and surpass us, that the future belongs to those who embrace the machine. This story has been told before, in different forms, at different times, with different technologies. It has always been compelling, and it has always been at least partly false. The AI story is the latest version of this ancient tale. It is being told by companies seeking investment, by researchers seeking funding, by journalists seeking readers, and by a culture that has always been susceptible to the allure of artificial minds. The story is powerful, and it has already changed the world. Trillions of dollars have been committed, industries have been reshaped, and governments have been mobilized. The story has become reality, or at least, a version of reality. But the story will not last forever. The gap between the narrative and the evidence will eventually become too large to ignore. The promises will fail to materialize. The expectations will be disappointed. The bubble will burst. And when it does, the consequences will be real. This book is an attempt to understand those consequences before they arrive. It is an attempt to see through the story to the reality beneath, to understand what AI really is, what it can and cannot do, and what will happen when the gap between expectation and reality becomes impossible to ignore. The story of AI is the greatest technology story ever sold. This book is the story of what happens when the story ends.